Guys, I'm freaking out.
We all are.
I'm in control here.
No, I'm really freaking out.
What?
Have you ever heard of the Vampire of Sacramento?
No, I haven't.
Nope.
Please be warned, this next story has graphic depictions of violence, animal abuse, sexual assault, and mutilation.
So the Vampire of Sacramento refers to Richard Trenton Chase. He was a notorious hybrid of spree and serial killer in the late 1970s. He killed 6 people in less than a month. He was born May 23rd, 1950. He died the day after Christmas in 1980. He was 30 years old. So Richard was raised in somewhat a normal family structure, 1950s, a small amount of child abuse, which was deemed societally acceptable for the time. But
like spankings?
A little bit more severe than that. But he was raised in a very healthy household. His parents provided everything he never wanted for anything.
Other than some late slammings?
From a very early age, Richard started to exhibit abnormal qualities. He had the classic McDonald triad, which we find in a lot of serial killers. So in these behaviors in childhood are bedwetting, arson, and the torture of animals.
Yeah.
He was especially strong in this last...
2 for 3.
Well,
What is that called again?
the McDonald triad.
I'll let you decide which ones.
It was this last trait in particular that Richard had a very strong liking for, the torture of animals. He was known to torture neighborhood cats. There is a story about him stabbing the family dog in the paws repeatedly and joking about cutting off its feet.
The fuck?
Wow, that's terrible.
So things progress. Richard grows a little bit older. He is, despite some of his oddities, very popular in school, popular with girls.
He was super funny.
He was...
He was very charming other than stabbing puppies in the paws.
He was also, he got into drugs a little early in his teens, so using LSD, using pot. So he had his drug friends, he had regular friends, he would go out on dates with girls, but it would also became known very quickly that Richard was impotent. So he, as many dates as he could get, he could never perform sexual acts with
and that rumor spreads quickly
very
in
quickly
high
in high school. So things,
not that I know.
Things go on, and Richard learns a little bit more about anatomy. He's particularly fascinated by anatomy. And he discovers that the impotence rather comes from the lack of engorgement of a sponge in the penis with blood. So men get erections because they have a lot of blood in their penis. So Richard, now it is known that he probably suffered from something known as Cotard's delusion, which Cotard's delusion is the feeling that you are lacking organs or that you are decaying on the inside or that you're a walking corpse. Richard started becoming obsessed with the idea of having bad blood, of not having enough blood, that he was decaying or losing this on the inside. And he even went to a psychiatrist to talk about this. It was really unusual. And the psychiatrist dismissed it and let it go.
What year span was this?
So the high school for Richard probably would have been around the mid-60s.
Okay.
And then he goes into his 20s. He moves out of his parents' house. He eventually gets a roommate, 2 women. He is a small-time drug dealer. He's still very, very odd. He's a thin man. He's rather timid, but still has a small circle of friends. And after living with these 2 women for a while, his behavior becomes increasingly strange. He was known to walk around in public when they had company, completely naked. He had very intense, off-putting behavior.
And that's weird,
Wait
right?
a minute,
Like,
yeah, walking around
it's a little
naked.
strange.
That reminds me of somebody who walks around with the balls out all the time over here.
So small, somewhat awkward societal things like this became more and more apparent with Richard, and his roommates eventually moved out. It was around this time also that the obsession with blood for Richard became more and more prevalent. He began to consume small animals, to purchase lots of rabbits, and he would take them home and blend them and drink the slurry that he had created.
Skinned or non-skinned?
Yeah.
Rabbit smoothie?
Rabbit smoothie, yes.
Rabbit smoothie?
He was particularly interested in almost taking on the strength like the character Renfield. Sometimes people call this Renfield syndrome, where he's taking on the life force of another creature by consuming it. Yes.
Strong like rabbit.
There are many tribes who also will drink the mentionables of opposing tribes, warriors. They will drink blood, and also even in current society, the placenta. A mother will ask for that to be taken home with them.
Because they're a weirdo.
It's a different mode of thought, man, daddy. You know, you're not on that
Weird
level.
one.
The
A
placenta
weird
is
one.
known to have lots of nutrients in it.
That is very true.
So do bananas.
Well,
Right, thank you. Yeah, get a steak.
They make shampoo out of animal placenta, so, you know.
Delicious.
Well, I'm not going to eat shampoo either.
Some gets in your mouth, though. And plus, you don't use shampoo.
Again, this behavior continues to escalate. Eventually, Richard tries to inject the blood of rabbits into his own veins.
That has to be bad.
It is
Into
bad.
Into his penis?
No. In just into his body, in order to prolong his own life, in order to fulfill his need for the blood he felt like he was losing all the time. He, even though it was a delusion, felt like he was constantly in pain. Later on in interviews, he would say that he felt like someone had stolen part of his arteries, or that the bones in his skull were facing backwards.
Ooh,
Whoa.
what?
So
And how,
he-
so he's looking out the back of his head all the time?
Or
No,
rather than
just it's an odd construction, constant headaches, like right, unnatural.
yeah, so imagine being under that sort of strain all the time. And so now he's in his mid-20s and he tries injecting this rabbit blood into himself. He gets blood poisoning, of course. And his parents finally, after just ignoring this crazy behavior for years, decide to check him into a mental facility. He goes into the Beverly Manor, and it's here because all he can talk about to the staff and other patients at this institution is blood and his consumption of blood, his particular like of rabbits and cats. It is also during this period while he is staying here, he manages to catch 2 birds, break their necks, and drink the blood out of their bodies, and the staff
Damn.
catches him.
What?
Commitment to the game.
Yes. So he earns the nickname Dracula at Beverly Manor.
Earned.
Yeah.
Eventually, he is released under the semblance of rehabilitation. Now, we're approaching the late 70s now. So think 1976, 1977.
Okay.
His parents, like you do after your son gets out of a mental institution after consuming the blood of animals, get him his own apartment that they pay for.
Oh, perfect.
Why not release him into society? What could go wrong?
Yeah.
What, are you
By
gonna live with
himself.
him?
Yeah.
Yeah, the behavior escalates more and more and more.
Duh.
I can see their friends are like, why are you coddling him? Like he was injecting rabbit blood into his veins. You don't know him. You know, he's changed a lot.
And then in 1977, things get worse between him and his family after he procures a .22 caliber automatic pistol.
Oh.
He
America.
purchases this gun for $70. He asks his mother to buy him a shoulder holster, which she refuses to do, so he goes and steals one from a thrift shop. He then proceeds to go back to his parents' house, and he shoots the family cat in front of his mother.
Oh, no.
After shooting the cat, he takes the blood coming out of the corpse of the cat and rubs it all over his face and body. They revoke their invitation to Christmas with Richard.
Ooh.
This was apparently
Burn.
Yeah.
sent him into experimenting further with his obsession with not only blood, but murder. So on December 29th, 1977, 51-year-old engineer Ambrose Griffin is helping his wife unload groceries out of the car in their driveway. He collapses out of nowhere. She wonders what's wrong, and it turns out that he has been shot with a .22 caliber bullet. There is no one around. There are no clues except for a few shell casings down the road. This was, in fact, Richard Chase, pushing his limits.
So this was a
growing.
handgun?
This was a handgun.
Okay, so it was some kind of like automatic.
Correct.
Well, yeah, you said automatic.
It's an automatic, because there were shell casings.
Semi
Revolvers
or-
don't.
or
well,
automatic?
Semi-automatic.
Semi-automatic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Revolvers don't eject
Right.
casings. Around this time, after the shooting, Richard, with the fear of being caught, puts on a normal semblance to his parents, but socially just falls apart. He stops bathing. Just any form of self-grooming just ignores. He begins wandering around the neighborhood. It is January, in a bright orange parka, and with his current habits of drinking animal blood, he wanders around with dried blood all over him.
Yeah, there's no problem with Richards. He's fine. He just does this weird blood thing, just wanders around. Look at that kid.
Yeah,
He
this
just looked like
almost-
he just pissed off PETA. That's about it.
right, yeah.
Triggered much?
At one point, he adopts 2 Labrador retrievers.
Oh, God, no.
No.
Executes them and drinks their blood.
Son of a bitch, dude.
Well, my night's ruined.
Yeah.
All of these animals
What
being
a
killed.
bummer.
We'll talk about people getting killed all day long. Talk about some dogs and cats like,
It's
oh,
a
man.
bummer, yeah.
This leads up to the day of January 23rd, 1978. So, all in one day, we see the escalation of a serial killer spree killer in a man that normally takes, I would say, years for any other killer. The day starts off with Richard wandering around in his bright orange parka. He is looking for houses. This also contributes to his nickname as the Vampire of Sacramento. When he would go from house to house, it starts off as burglary. He would only choose houses that were the doors were unlocked. He felt that a locked door meant he wasn't welcome, that he hadn't been invited into the house, but an open door, an unlocked door, was fair game. So he's wandering around the neighborhood looking for unlocked doors, and he checks a house, runs around the back, and stares coldly through the window, the plate glass window, at a woman who is standing right there and sees him. She said that he examined her with such a lack of emotion, it was almost like he was buying something. Like he was like maybe looking over how you would feel about buying a car or buying a new piece of jewelry.
That's a hell of a
he did
description.
Nothing. He did nothing but lit a cigarette and walked away. So, a little bit later on, at the home of Robert and Barbara Edwards, he finds an open door and goes in. He goes to their infant baby's room and proceeds to open up the dresser drawers and piss in all the clothes. And then he defecates on the child's bed.
Jesus.
He begins rummaging around the house, stealing things, and he has a bag full of objects that they found later when Robert and Barbara come home. They chase him around the house screaming, "Stop, stop," and he screams back at them, "I was taking a shortcut, I was taking a shortcut."
That's insane.
He manages to slip past them and runs out the front door. So, again, it's this man covered in dried-in blood in a bright orange parka. He's filthy, he's skinny, he looks like death. He shit and piss in this child's room. They chase him out of the house. He goes immediately to the nearest food mart to buy an orange soda because he was thirsty.
Come on, that makes you
thirsty work.
Right.
It is here that he runs into an old high school friend, Nancy Holden. She does not recognize him, and she is frankly scared of him. And he is also carrying around the .22 in his shoulder holster this whole time. He tries to get a ride from her, and she manages to ward him off. About an hour later, he spies, wandering around the neighborhood, a van that was previously at the food mart. He tries the door, and as he's trying the door, Teresa Wallen is approaching the front door. She's taking out the garbage. He pulls his .22, shoots her once through the hand, which he has put out to stop the bullet. It pops out of her elbow, nicks her neck, then he shoots her again in the head. Then he goes directly up to her from about 6 inches away and shoots her once more in the head.
Oh, man.
Point blank.
Point blank.
Called the full John Wick.
At this point, Richard drags the body inside. He goes to the kitchen and gets a knife, takes a dried yogurt cup that he finds from the garbage that Teresa was carrying into the bedroom, and proceeds to stab her so hard that it splits her sternum open and cuts her open, moves around her organs, repeatedly stabs them. Everything is damaged except for the kidneys. He then fills the yogurt cup with as much blood as he can from the stomach cavity and drinks it. He rubs blood all over his face and hands and leaves the building.
He desanguinates her.
Yes.
And then bathes in her blood. And then walks away.
Police basically found bloody footprints and handprints. He had been smart enough to wear rubber gloves, or aware enough to wear rubber gloves. Things get even worse from here on. In 4-day span, he is seen wandering around the neighborhood, going door to door asking for old copies of Mad Magazine and Cosmo Magazine.
Weird.
This leads up to January 27th. At 9 a.m., 38-year-old Evelyn Meredith is planning to get her son, Jason, who is 6, ready for a trip to go into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Her friend, Danny Meredith, comes over and she asks him to run out and get snowshoes, to rent snowshoes for Jason. While Danny is away, Richard Chase shows up at the house. He goes around the back, he finds the back door unlocked, and goes inside. Evelyn is in the bathtub, and he shoots her once in the head, killing her instantly. He drags the body from the tub onto the bed, and it is thought, no one knows for sure, that at this time, Jason, her son, comes into the bedroom where Richard proceeds to shoot him twice in the head.
Christ.
He then continues to defile the body as he had before with Teresa Wallen when Danny Meredith comes back to the house. He greets him in the hallway and shoots him between the eyes once, killing him.
Jeez.
All of these just point blank range,
yes,
right?
As close as possible. It's at this point that he hears a small child's cry from the other room.
Oh, no.
That is of 20-month-old nephew of Evelyn Meredith, David Ferraria. After defiling the corpse of Evelyn Meredith and proceeding to sodomize it, after eating part of the liver and removing as much blood as possible. He goes and kills the 20-month-old. He leaves part of the brain in the bathtub, decapitates the child, and leaves the house with a bucket of blood and the infant's body wrapped in a blanket under his arm. The police worked very, very hard on this case, and with the help of Nancy Holden, after recognizing a police sketch of the suspect, they were able to apprehend Richard Chase, who was eventually sentenced to death in 1980 at the behest of other inmates and the people surrounding him in prison, in San Quentin prison. He overdosed on his antidepressants and died of toxic ingestion.
So you think my oyster boil is as bad as this guy?
Did I overreact?